Chill here with Sirius Dallas Moon. And during the eclipse, solar eclipse, I see that um, the priest and activist of human rights, Jesse Jackson, died at 84. And he was considered close to Martin Luther King. They were acting against racism and for equality of rights for, it says Afro Americans, black people, okay? In the 80s. So he was running twice for for presidency. Um, for the Jewish community is considered um, controversial because he said once that he's sick of hearing of the Holocaust, and a very few Jewish journalists that are able to be objective in Arab. But Epstein's were anyway. Let's honor this person. And it's not that just so yes, solar eclipses are definitely times where we can say goodbye to leaders. Aquarius is definitely social movements and movements that have an agenda to do with humanity. So Aquarius is not a simple sign, nor is activism in any way simple. And indeed, we lost a person that was prominent figure. Now, to be honest, I knew a little bit about Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I know that when I think it was Malcolm X when he wanted to walk out of Islam, he was assassinated. I know a tiny of a fraction of a little bit about secret societies. It's all the religions, and when it's time to charge the monarchies, then they persecute the Templars. So this is what I know. What was his role in that equation, and in what ways was he trying to bring better conditions to black people? Note that at least his gender performance, because we don't actually know, was man, as far as I know. So, um, which can create another intricacy. Let's take a look at the chart. A-rated means we have a good ascendant in midheaven, 25 degrees Capricorn ascendant, my lot of fortune, and indeed is Saturn ruled eclipse, and I run into that midway into the eclipse, in a very funny way, by the way. Midheaven, basically, there were some activists against my action on Facebook. I did so many bad things that I really don't know against which were they coming. I mean, I just speak the truth, and apparently this is almost unthinkable. So I was trying to share something. I don't even remember what. And then I see, somehow I managed to see my Facebook, and somebody talks about them not liking people bashing that went to meet his creator. And I'm like, is King Charles dead? Are they referring to Benjamin Netanyahu? And then so I looked at the news, and and then I saw this, and I'm like, okay, so they didn't like him because he was saying that he's sick of hearing about the Holocaust. Well, this is actually listening to BIPOC people and black people. I understand that the opinion is, in many cases, that Jews will always say, yeah, we relate because of Holocaust, while they don't do enough to stop the Holocaust towards BIPOC people today. And I guess that was the line of argument. Now, again, I'm not saying that this is true or false. Most actions of people are so hidden that the people that they help don't even know that they are helped. When we come to help people, it's really a shot in the dark because we never know what could put them in danger as well. So, Lilith moon in Taurus, Saturn 27 degrees Taurus, Uranus 29 degrees Taurus. This would be Uranus return for him. Indeed, 84 is a Uranus cycle. Uranus Saturn, Pluto in Leo, Chiron in Leo, Jupiter Gemini. This is, well, he's past his Neptune opposition. Rahu Ketu reversal. So this is a set of eclipses with Rahu Ketu reversal. He's already been, I think it's the Genghis Khan eclipse that was actually the issue, but we meet it in this eclipse. Why am I saying that? Because Ketu was on his Rahu. The Rahu Ketu reversal was when we has, I call it the Genghis Khan eclipse, the September eclipses of 2025. And those were lunar eclipses. I predicted that lunar eclipses can affect populist leaders, and the conjoining of this one and this one, of the solar eclipse, which is leaders of humanitarian or humanity-related issues, topics, and I'm not saying causes because I've seen so much. um, and lunar eclipses that can affect populist leaders, and he was supposedly representing, he did try to run for politics, and he was supposedly representing his people, so he would have run as a populist leader, populist representing the people. Because we tend to forget that with what we call populism, but also we tend to forget lobbying when we analyze populism, which was perhaps the bias of my instructor, Danny Filk, perhaps. And Mercury 9 degrees Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio. Okay, Venus-Uranus opposition definitely gives us a person that would have rebellious values, because Venus is values, and in a Mars sign he will fight for them. Mars in Aries, strong in Aries, Mars retrograde, Mars opposition Sun. So Venus ruling over Sun and Mars ruling over Venus opposing the Sun, it's creating a very fierce tension, a violent tension, to be quite frank. But he took that also to basically rebel against the traditional, or how should I say that? This could definitely be rebelling against any form of segregation, but I'm trying to explain why. Saturn, I know, is limitation, is skin color. Saturn Venus sign is women, but it is with Uranus and can also be not necessarily gender expression of women. And Mars Sun creates here something where the actions could even come into conflict with his own personality. He could have very strong, powerful leadership that is almost instinctual and rebellious, but he could also be rebelling even in himself. Mind you, I don't know what he did. I just know that he knew that he was close to Martin Luther King. Saturn here represents the ascendant. Saturn, Uranus, rebellious persona, is one, two, three, four, five. So rights of women and children could have been both a limitation factor. This is a day chart, so Saturn is actually the malefic out of sect. So this could actually be a person who might have not been like he was if he was disrespectful to women, it would with the sun in the middle decan of Libra, it would go against him. Because this is the decan of Libra where the scales dip. Um, midheaven midheaven Scorpio, ruled by this Mars, tension between his life mission or his public persona and himself, and okay, and the planet that represents himself. um, Saturn here is not making an aspect to Mars. This death, I believe, is both to do with the current eclipse, but also kind of like the continuation of the aftermath of the eclipses, which was besieging of cities. During these eclipses, we saw the building of a digital prison city in Palestine, and Israel stamping state of Palestine to people that enter Rafah. So, um, and of course, besieging, Minnesota, Portland, with this Rahu that right now is in Pisces. So we're seeing basically American cities besieging, but the people also taking their power and beginning to do something about that. And this name, okay, of this particular person comes into mind because BIPOC people saw it coming, black people coming, black people dealt with that, and I see a lot of black people trying to basically give tips to white people of what to do against that. I predicted around when Pluto was still in Capricorn, I predicted that people are going to need to learn from black people, um, and because black people basically were the most recent um, that tackled slavery, and I know that black enslaved whites and so on. For example, the god for Mercury. We have also Eshu, which Eshu is the African god, and the symbolism with Western esotericism and the African emerging esotericism, because these are different countries. It's like saying Chinese traditional medicine, okay, but China is so big, and so um, and this is where yeah, but this is where this name comes about, because now that white people are dealing with attempts to enslave them by their people, um, and it happens for some time, the important figures that went through went through those things before we were spread out to the wider public. And this is a prominent figure that was both present at the time of Martin Luther King um, and Malcolm X and the Black Panthers, and it very likely, with those organizations, such people hardly ever die natural death, even when it looks like that. The name Opus Dei might come to mind, and people say, but Opus Dei is so white and Falcon. We wouldn't have such a rise of African countries without. Anyway, moving on, let's take a look at the Wikipedia. So, uh, I do it Spirit of Matter style. I looked at the chart and now I'm going to see what is written, because this name, as a person who grew outside of the community that he was representing, then I wonder whoever came um, to actually hear about him. Like, why did I not hear that name? Probably because I was situated in Israel and they kind of don't like him here for what he said about the Holocaust. But it's not for what he said about the Holocaust, it's because he could warn us about what the Israelis kept saying that we can't compare to before even 2019. And if you know a little bit of world events, you understand what am I referring to. Um, so let's read it in English. I have a feeling that the English has a little more information than the Hebrew in this one. Jesse Louis Jackson, American civil rights activist, politician, and ordained Baptist minister. I said what I said Opus Dei. A protege of Martin Luther King. I know people are like, ah, come on. Um, give me a name of a woman feminist that probably is also in, like, if that's, Epstein files, cloning, um, a protege of Martin Luther King Jr. during civil rights movement. He became one of the most prominent civil rights leaders of the 20th and early 21st century. From 1991 to 1997, served as shadow delegate and shadow senator in the District of Columbia. He was the father of U.S. Representative Jonathan Jackson and former U.S. Representative Jess Jackson, Jr. As deep state as it goes. Born in Greenville, South California. So again, this is a man that knew the Congress from within when it's ISO clock, 2 meters from Civil War clock, reingressing for good, which is Uranus in Gemini, knew Martin Luther King, so he was there when, and that's a guy that if any script is replaying itself in verbatim, that's the guy who could tell us the script in verbatim. And his why is dead, okay? Baptist. He was baptized onwards before he can share too much information. Actually, him saying he's sick about hearing of the Holocaust, basically denoting that he's sick of hearing about that which happened in the past when it's happening in the present, also to Jews. And by the way, the one post through which I met got that. Okay, it was the one good Jew. um, because again, when we talk about topics of human rights is not an exclusive human right is not an exclusive thing. It's not a privileged thing. It's not something that we can segregate, or then that's just a tautology, and that's the guy that lived through all the attempts to delay justice. When it's ISO clock, that's probably a guy, I don't know if he would stand 10 toes down in his position, and when they do that from within the system, they basically step 10 toes in the grave. um, and that is sad to see. Again, it looks natural because he was 84 and Uranus return and so on and so forth. But is it really? Nothing's 22ing, nothing's 11thing. Um, the midheaven, the ascendant was 18ing. From my vantage point, um, and I had to wonder about the friend that I don't know if it's even safe to look for whether they're alive, and I had to wonder if they are not alive, that is it not actually safer or better. Um, One really challenging point of eclipse, and then I see this news of this person that I didn't know. I knew the saying, I knew his opinion, but I didn't know the man. Um, Jackson did not seek presidency again after 1998, and he was elected as the District of Columbia shadow senator, um, serving one term during Bush and Clinton administrations. So if there would be a guy that would know to tell us to stop talking about Trump and start talking about civil rights, that would be the guy. And I've been whispering to some white podcasts, and my whispers went, whether unheard or not practiced, which is, of course, everybody's entitled to their own choice and opinions. Um, but the building of the death and concentration camps, I can date at least the tent camps being evacuated, violation of the First Amendment during Biden's regime. And then the fact that Donald Trump did not improve upon the situation doesn't say that he started it, or that he has as much say in it as people would like to think. Particularly with the structure of the American governance, okay? He can do nothing without the Congress, and even when it comes to military action, the military can simply block him and disobey. Knitting Cult Lady, and if I say the details wrong, then you can watch her and she will say it in her words, because basically, and she's working for the army, so if there is an action that the army cannot complete or is unrealistic for the army to win, then it's basically considered illegal action. And so I think both the Congress and the president can say whatever, but the army will see it as illegal order. If I got her right. So the structure of the American Parliament does not allow too much power for the president as we would like to think that it does, and therefore saying the name of a president or any president, um, and again, definitely addressing the Congress, absolutely. But we have to think deeper into the Epstein files and what they expose, um, to find the point of interferences. And if there's anything to besiege, is islands, yachts, and emergency centers for children, particularly for children with this Neptune in the fifth house of the Sibley chart. And it's not for a different perspective with Pluto in the fifth house of Israel is similar in Israel for completely different circumstances. Um, but that would be the guy that he couldn't say it as much as I can say it, because he was born within those circles. Um, and or maybe he was about to say something of that sort. Civil rights activism. So let his legacy not die with him. Jackson was known for commanding public attention since he started working for Martin Luther King. 1965, he participated in the Selma to Montgomery marches. I think those were the times that we had Black Panthers movement also in Israel. Apanterim Ashchorim, which was basically the North African countries that were basically they were put in how should I say that? They were put in rural cities in hope that they will, with their labor force or just their presence, that they will secure the borders. But the corporations were falling flat, and not managing to sustain. That was juxtaposed. Okay, the agrarian projects were way more successful than the industrial ones, except for the textile factory. But the people that were in those cities, if it was one corporation or one industrial place, and then they just put people, they just gave them houses there, and they were kind of building ghettos with that. And this is what happens when the factory is closed and people have literally nothing to do. And then they were complaining about the people that actually did not have the opportunities. So it was an unsuccessful industrialization project that took place during the 60s and during the foundation of Israel, but also during the 60s. We had the Black Panther movement that wanted to shift the tone, and this was the background for the election of a Polish guy that capitalized on that, particularly after the wars, in which, with mandatory army recruitment, United States be warned, United States be warned, United States be warned. I'm not talking about watch my episodes about Israel. I'm not talking about it for no reason, okay? Israel is a mandatory army service. Black Panthers got their rights and acceptance through begging because they served in the army, and then they had rights through the army service because they were considered taking a part in the mandatory army service. Okay, doing that in United States is the death of human rights. Needing cultivate the cultification of United States, or cultification even of the military. She can continue me where I cannot. Okay, I'm just gonna say one thing, Zumbor, and this is the core. How uh, do soldiers get mind control and then commit war crimes? Um, I saying nothing because I just did. So, in 1966. King and Bevel. I think this was, yes, this was the time that Uranus was with Pluto in Virgo. Another Mercury sign, this would be the Uranus square for Israel and United States. Different years, Black Panther movements, Black Panther movements. Um, and so, yet beware of perpetual mandatory army service countries. Israel is basically one country, and everything you hate about Israel, a lot of it has to do with the fact that they managed to have a mandatory army service country. Um, I was, by the way, one of the people that tried to oppose that or present an opposing view. There are pros and cons to professional army and to um, okay, but in the United States, for example, the army is an escape route for people, um, and it's by design, so it's not actually professional army, and because it's not actually voluntary recruitment. And I'm not going to address that myself. There are people that work for the army and go against, and they have their own. They know way better than me. By the way, a lot of people in the IDF, they look to the American army and think that it's better there, particularly in the Marines. So anybody that wants to, lift the glove and mid bust, it's like, okay, say goodbye to your erection. Um, in fact, this happens in Israel as well. Okay, just what's the undertone? What's the undertone? It's life energy, it's energy siphoning ritual. Anyway, Um, so, from his tactics, Operation Breadbasket had been separated by Atlanta leadership of the SCLC as a job placement agency for blacks. That sounds like a concentration camp. Non locality. Neural network of concentration camp non locality. Um, Under Jackson's leadership, a key goal was to encourage massive boycotts by black consumers as a means to pressure white owned business to hire blacks and to purchase goods and services from black owned firms. Okay, basically to break the embargo around the ability of black people to make a living from anything outside Gladio, namely drug, child, and human trafficking under the guise of jazz and liberation music. Again, they were tortured to that, and then they suffered the consequences of basically being the outcast at a society, and that created the name for black people or black community, and basically created a stigma around the culture that was by design, where they never had a venue. Okay, a person would get killed before he could get to do something that's not crime. It's true. It's also for white elite. I know. I know. And now any business, which is a big issue. Um, okay. So, under Jackson's direction, Operation Breadbasket had popular weekly workshops on Chicago's South Side featuring white and black political and economic leaders, and religious services, complete with a jazz band and a choir. Um, like I said, this was the century of Gladio. It's still it's still in the aftermath of Gladio. Um, and Uranus was closing a cycle with Pluto during the 60s. It was conjoining Pluto. Neptune was sextiling. Jackson became involved in the SCLC leadership disputes following King's assassination, April 4, 1968. Um, when King was shot, Jackson was in the parking lot one floor below. He told the reporters he was the last person to speak to King and that King died. Okay, this is why people said King died to meet his, that he was the king that died to meet that went to meet his god or something like that. Um, in his arm, an account that several King aides disputed. In the wake of King's death, Jackson worked on SCLC's Poor People's Crusade in Washington, D.C., and was credited with managing its 15-acre tent city. Again, we had evacuation of 10 cities during Biden's regime. I know because my colleagues on back then Twitter were getting backlash. They say, "Why don't you talk about this?" And I don't know them personally, but I'm like, one of them likes to be passive aggressive mentioning things, and the other one is just mentioning things. So if they could speak, they would speak. And um, and then I realized, and the in Spirit of Matter actually did dedicated several chapters to discuss the building that's in concentration camps for the homeless and the evacuation of those and the imprisoning of the journalists, violation of the First Amendment, And I said my American colleagues can't say it, they can't this, they can't that. Fractions of a millisecond later, Israel had to respond. Um, a response that my gut instinct upon 7th October was Nazi Germany passed the threshold in 1948, and then we passed the torch in 20. Back then it was 2023 to Palestine. I think I even began to give uh, tips on what to learn to prevent the next Holocaust. Um, but this is yeah, so this is a guy that definitely did something about homelessness in tent city. And by the way, that's a guy that would remember that it happened in Biden. Okay, those events happened during Biden's. Again, I got nothing. I'm not an American. I don't vote in American elections. Although, according to the residents, I should be. Some say it's a military basement or another star in the flag, but I'm not complaining. So, by the way, I was supposed to be because my parents were supposed to give birth to me in United States, in Chicago. They didn't do that, and I was born in another complicated place. Uh, now, um, so 10 cities, okay? Important to know that because it's very easy. Here's the thing: right wingers, they get it's easy for them to gain their reputations, and we can't say that Trump abolished the evacuation of 10 cities. But to be honest and sincere, we have to take into account that he couldn't have done that without the blue pill. Okay? Again, we'll need to look at a deeper inspection into the structure of the Congress. But what structure or agency, um, saying one name is not going to address not the structure and not the fact that those 10 cities were evacuated with the journalists that broadcasted the evacuation, violating the First Amendment. I was talking about the Second Amendment that was severely attacked, and they were using the energy of my peers, which caused a fraction in trust. But I went into the structure of how attacks happen and the role of torture to loss of sense of self. Um, Basically, in that as something to raise awareness to, rather than falling into the division and and to patterns that would collapse the state or would collapse the wave frequency into a state that is not productive to actually have better calls to actions that are more concrete and evidence based, like the classified budgets projects, which would tell us of also the classified technologies that would allow us to see where were the tortures to loss of sense of self, which could also serve as jurisdiction defense, again, Larry Loudon that already went to law, but I was taking Larry Loudon from my thesis theoretical framework of the 1990s and the role of technology in turning science from pseudoscience to basically conventionally accepted science by allowing us to observe what we thought was a mystery. And of course, with the fact that the role of the observation, that the observation is a part of causing the collapsed wave, okay, that the quantum logos, um, it creates a level of intricacy that nevertheless allows us to take various probabilities from different perspectives and see where does a shift in the sense of self happen. A lot of the people that are worried that they would get imprisoned, that they would this, that they would that, when they were basically tortured um, until they became torturers, or they were doing things. And one of the things they were doing with MK Ultra and MK often is, let's say a person would press a button, the person wouldn't know what that button does, and sometimes they wanted to go more, they wouldn't have the reaction of what they do, the implication. They would play randomly on the implication. Wow, it is, Frank Olson o'clock. So um, those things are beyond terrifying, and I had undergone severe attacks, severe MK often rape, and um, yeah, and that was where I called to declassify classified projects budget, and actually address the core issue rather than falling into layers of analysis that are not compatible with the model of mind control and extortion cults, as well as consolidation on natural resources in a changing borders times on changing regimes times world. Okay. Okay, 1969, New York Times reported several black leaders viewed Jackson as King's successor, and that Jackson was one of the few black activists who was preaching racial reconciliation, which probably made him controversial amongst black people as well, because to reconcile, rights actually have to be there. Okay, you gotta have equal to reconcile. This question was also addressed with Israel Palestine and between genders, sex and genders. Um, Jackson believed the conspiracy was involved in King's murder. 1978, he met with King's convicted assassin James Earl Ray for 4 hours. I addressed political assassination. In this case, I don't know exactly what was the. For Malcolm X, I know he wanted to get out of Islam, which basically it means getting out of deep state. but but for this case, I don't know. Usually, the structure, I'm going to let down a lot of people that grew an idealized king, but usually the structure of political assassination is such that the during the ritual abuse rites, the person who would be the assassin is forming a melting pot with the consciousness of the to be assassinated person, and they become one in the consciousness. I actually witnessed such a case, and then that person who was the assassin, they become perpetrator, and then after being victim, and they saw the person that they are going to assassinate being victim as well, and then as they are in this mass psychosis of torture, both of them are likely tortured at that time. They're invisible torture, MK often torture, and my prediction is that this creates the accessibility of the assassin to basically be in almost quantum entanglement mind control relation. Was an attempt to do that to me in 2019. Um, and because I was looking to the body mind question in the medicines with the perspective of philosophy of science now. Um, and basically, that quantum entanglement state creates this union of movement that would allow the assassin to track, access, and shoot the assassin. And then mind control, another trigger, the person that killed would be basically guided with commands while being under mind control and dissociation of sense of self. And again, I could be wrong in that prediction, but declassifying classified technologies could definitely approve or disprove parts of what I say. It couldn't disprove everything because I'm on the money. Okay, I said what I said. And there is use of dark occult. There is use of dark occult. Dark occult was supposed to be anti-slavery and anti-colonialism, but of course, MK Often and similar projects trained. And the sad thing is that sometimes this would be the only outlet for, let's say, BIPOC people, First Nations, and sometimes it would be training people or completely that would be completely untrained trying that, um, and that would be to enslave rather than to liberate from slavery. So Jackson was also reported seeking coalition with whites in order to approach what was considered racial problems as economic and class problems. When we change the race problems into class fight between the haves and have-nots, um, then we are going to have a new ball game. Now, I don't know what I think about it. I will have to meditate on this assessment. I know a Dutch lawyer that was trying to operate in much similar way. He was coming from the elite. Um, but again, they're all knocked down at me too. So actually, my call to declassify classified projects could show that at least some of them were at basically psychosis while raping, which would address the mind control rites of passage, um, and because it also addresses now the things that they are forced, that they are extorted to do, which we see with eyes, then the people can call to declassify these technologies that are now used to target civilians as well, um, and that could help everyone. Um, Prime Minister Maloney calls to basically use temporary chemical castration in order to pedophiles, in order to allow for venue of hope to people that would be caught for pedophilia. Again, thinking about the Epstein class, these are pragmatic solutions, acknowledging the fact that people were born into death cults, which of course you can't say, but but also, or maybe she did, I don't know. But this is also acknowledging the fact that um, when we talk about the rule that's what's done on the minority is done to the larger population later, I want you to think Gates, Bill Gates, and like I said, people don't, when they said the pyramid is upside down, that's what they meant as well. Um, and also definitely the BIPOC were considered expandable children, but the elites are also not considered um, must survive children. Okay, they have to continuously show superhuman qualities, and nobody tells them which. Anneke Lucas testifies that she was supposed to be killed and another child was supposed to be raped. Then the child performed a slow, and it contacted the person that was supposed to actually rape the child, and he saw himself in the child and he wanted to kill that, and that's how Annika Lucas was not not really saved. She wasn't murdered, and she was raped. And then she cried, and they thought she cried because she was raped, and she cried because she saw that child suddenly over nothing being murdered, and she was sure that she was going to get murdered. As a child, she was less than 11 when describing all of these things. Um, so yes, do do I think that cloning farms disincluded black people as cloned? Um, I don't think so, and this is something that also um, needs to be considered. Um, in any case, they would need to create some sort of a quantum entanglement because they would have only one go at assassination. They usually go by what I figured from XCIA broadcasters is that they would use they would basically use the fact that a person, let's say, press a button and they don't know if an A bomb drops or if it's just a drill. In Israel, we saw the assassin of Yitzhak Rabin saying "srak, srak, srak," basically drill, drill, drill. But that drill was him in prison for nearly the rest of his life. And the fact that he was wearing a kippah and being religious, and Yitzhak Rabin was secular, and he was considered Kahanist or right wing, and Yitzhak Rabin was left, um, created an extra layer there. And of course, they love that the assassin is somehow connected with the nation or with the okay. So it's a part of that reason called. Um, yeah, attended to political assassination prevention. And this is the structure, so some sort of entanglement must have been. And you say, but Rabin and, you know, this is not a day for rose colored glasses. And he organized the October 1971 Black Expo in Chicago, a trade, and again, they could have tortured Rabin, tortured that person, okay? But they would need to create this entanglement because they have only one go, and whoever knows that it's not a drill, they have only one go to make it not a drill. Because if the not drill is drill, the person is assassin. They would be coming with it thinking that it's a drill. But the person is assassined. Okay, they would need to be somehow entangled, and it only links through mind control where there is exchange, and because they use darker code, then they can do that by energy and MK often, which is one of the things that I was exposing on my Spirit of Matter channel and on this channel. So Jackson and Aberranthi had a complete falling out, with the split described as part of the leadership struggle between Jackson, who had national profile, and Abernathy, whose prominence was from the civil rights movement. Again, be careful because both are not unaffiliated with global stuff. Black people can't tell you that. Um, okay, Rainbow Coalition. Black people need a Republican Party to compete for us so that we can have real alternatives. The Republican Party needs black people if it is to ever compete for national office. This is, by the way, something that Trump really took to the heart. He really did have BIPOC voters. Um, and this is also weakened the weakened black people tremendously, because a black woman that wanted to preserve her womb had to choose between being raped to give birth and being toxined out of her womb and fertility. Also, a white woman, but for black women, it became a really no go, no go, no go, no go, even within their community. And lo and behold, cisgender white woman, black woman, had an even bigger issue. I'm not going to address that in full right now. Um, but the fact is that cloning allows population control to unprecedented layers, and when they call for purity, Crasia Tassio talks about the notion of purity and prediction, that they will only let um, young girls to be pregnant, basically to rape young girls for pregnancy. Trudy Verstegen talks about that, but the more gruesome factors regarding that. Um, Again, Trudy Verstegen is not an astrologer, at least not in the open, so I don't know if she is or not. But the thing is that um, when they do those things, they're basically killing the women and the mothers, um, so that they can have population control and mind control for the children. So those are very, very dark aspects that the BIPOC woman um, was literally confiscated because she could not rely on white women as allies. White women were oppressed themselves, um, but neither could she rely on her fellow men. And a lot of black women warn white women from the things that they know that they can't fool the community, so they try outside. Um, there is no causal connection between the boycott in 1983 and the meeting in the middle of the 90s and me buying this company in 1998, said Youssef. Okay, what the heck happened? 1996, that was the Trolodex. Um, Jackson Jesse's son by Jackson family friend Ron Burkle. In 1998, Yosef and his brother Jonathan were chosen by Anheuser-Busch to head River North Sales, a Chicago beer distribution company, leading to controversy. So, minority employment and distribution of network. Okay, so 1983, Jackson and Operation Push led a boycott against that beer giant for basically hiring child slavery. And then they went and bought that company, creating a controversy, claiming that there is no connection. Now, here's the deal. If somebody buys Amazon tomorrow and actually improves upon the workers' rights there, I see no problem. In fact, this is what mergers and acquisitions are supposed to do. Okay, if I see, let's say somebody runs a company, British East India. Now, let's keep it local, Dutch East India. But they use slavery and cloning. And I say, well, let's buy Dutch East India, abolish cloning and abolish slavery, which will naturally increase revenue and redistribute it more evenly, then why the heck not? Aries return, Aries return for VOC. I ain't saying nothing. But I get mad where the big money at. So, and I get mad constructively. So this is where, think about it. It's not about woman-owned VOC. It's about zero slavery, zero rape VOC. which would cause less drowning in ships,